Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Dark and Creepy. All stories are written and narrated by me, MC Allen. If you hear screaming or a baby crying from the woods, whatever you do, don't follow it. That's what they first told me when I moved to a rural town about 2 years ago, and I probably retold it a dozen times to people who have visited me since. I'm finally turning to No Sleep Reddit to tell of my experiences and see if any of you have had some similar to mine. It's not just crying though, it also involves voices that call you by name, asking you to come to them. As of now, I'm not too scared to hear random crying or voices coming from the mountains, because I've gotten used to it over the years. There are certain sounds that come from the wilderness that scare me to death, however, because they usually signal of something bad to happen. Such as this one time, where we heard a louder than usual chilling cry mixed with screams randomly throughout the day. And that same night, there were 2 goats on one of the farms that were found mutilated and torn to pieces at the edge of the woods. There were separate occasions of this same sounding cry, and similar things have happened. There are only about 10 families that live in this area, and they are a tight-knit community. So when I first moved in here 2 years ago, they tended to not like me, but have grown to accept me. They mainly don't like new people moving into this area or tourists stopping by, because that usually causes the crying from the woods to grow louder, or the tourists end up missing because they didn't listen to us when we told them not to follow the sounds. We rarely get tourists now compared to when I first moved here, and since so many people have gone missing in the past, the government has blocked off the forest with a large fence about a year ago. It's still public land that you can go into, but they put up the fence to try and dissuade people from doing so. Search and Rescue has also put up warning signs that the area is dangerous, enter at your own risk. They never specified why, and I'm never going to tell you guys where my town is located because I know people are going to be stupid enough to try and test this story out. I'm posting these stories on Reddit because I want to see if anyone else out there is experiencing the same thing where they live, or is it just exclusive to my town? The first week I moved into this town was probably one of the scariest experiences of my life, because I wasn't used to the random crying that came from the forest. When I heard a baby crying out in the woods on the second day, when I was loading furniture into my house, I didn't know what to think. It was the first time I had ever experienced it, and the people in town already had told me not to follow it and to just ignore them. When they first told me, I was in disbelief of this and probably thought that it was how the wind brushed through the trees or something like that made the sounds. So when I heard the crying of a newborn that sounded so realistic to even the sounds of it breathing between whines could be heard coming from the woods, I had no idea what I should do. My natural instincts were to go see what was wrong and if there was a way I could help. But what if what the people in town were saying was real, and that I should never follow it? I decided that I wasn't going to follow it too far, just hoping that I would be able to see whatever it was making the noise. I started walking towards the trees, and got to about the tree line. As I did, a hand reached out and grabbed me firmly. It was one of the neighbors that was helping me move all of my things in, and I'll say his name is Manuel, to keep his identity safe. He then told me, "I knew you were going to try that at one point. What if there's someone over there that needs our help?" I asked as I pulled my arm out of his grasp. "Look here, no one in this town knows what makes those sounds, and everyone that finds out, die. Don't go over there. Simple as that," he replied as he tapped me on the shoulder and then continued to carry boxes into my house. I tried to ask him more questions about it, but he was always hesitant to talk about it and avoided the conversation the best he could. He finally got annoyed by my constant pestering, that he responded saying, "I've told you everything you need to know about those sounds. Whatever or wherever they come from can hear what we are saying, and supposedly, if you think or talk about it too much, you'll be driven mad as that allows it access to your thoughts." I stopped asking him questions after that, and we now get along great together. The main thing that I got from what he said was that as long as you follow the main rule of not following them, you'll be fine. There are rare occasions, however, like with the goats that have died where the thing comes for you. Very few, while I've lived here, have gone missing, but I've heard of many of the stories of the townspeople of hikers who've never came back, and even people from search and rescue that have gone missing. It makes sense why the Forest Service put up the sign saying, "Dangerous, enter at your own risk," on the fence. Because how are you supposed to try and find someone out there when there's random crying and even voices calling us by name from the woods? I have a particular story that comes the closest to describing whatever is out there, and it came from someone from search and rescue that made it out. It's the closest thing we have to a description of what it looks like, but I'll save that for another time, due to that I don't want to have my thoughts be thinking about that thing for an extended period of time, and you know why. I will finish this requesting that if you ever do hear people calling you from the woods, or a baby crying, even if they sound like family, don't follow them. Always be aware of people that are around you, because the thing in the woods making the sound is often known to imitate the same voices of loved ones. I will say again, one more time, to ingrain it into your skull, just ignore them and act like nothing is wrong. Since the last time I uploaded the first part of my story, I have gotten a few comments and replies of people telling me what the noises could be caused by. The top two were SCP-939, with its nickname being With Many Voices. And for those who do not know what an SCP is, it's a supposed thing that needs to be secured, then contained, and lastly protected. Thus the nickname of SCP, because they are highly dangerous. The other was that skinwalkers are also able to imitate human voices and trick people by luring them with a loved one's voice. However, it is said that only extremely skilled skinwalkers are able to do this. That means it's very rare to come across this trait in them. And so most encounters just describe seeing them, but never actually hearing loved ones' voices coming from it. I would like to thank all of you for your concerns and interest in what I have to say, but I must warn you ahead of time. Do not think about this thing for an extended period of time, or else it will drive you mad. To actually write this all out for you, I have to take about 30-minute breaks for every 20 minutes I'm able to write. If I try to push past those 20 minutes, then random images flash through my head of myself dying in gruesome ways. So I beg of you that when you finish reading this, please go listen to music or watch your favorite TV show. But whatever you do, do not keep thinking about it. After writing part 1 of this, I found random scratches in the back of my house, and I've heard eerie knocking on my window during the night. I never go investigate, but just rather sleep through them. However, it's worth the risk of that thing coming to get me, because the local government has tried to cover it up, but I think everyone should be warned not to follow those sounds. Anyway, I'm first going to tell you of a story that I first heard when I came to town from one of the families here, who I'll call the Jeffreys. So one evening, they were having a barbecue in their backyard, and there were about 6 of them altogether. They had 2 children, with the younger being only a year old, while the other one was around 5. It was later in the evening when the 5-year-old went looking for cool-shaped rocks, as in the words of the boy. So while he's doing this, the 5-year-old's mother is keeping an eye on him, but the year-old baby begins to cry, who's being held by her father-in-law. So she quickly rushes over to help her baby and forgets about the boy, who is now ever so slowly wandering away. That's when they hear the voices whisper from the woods, calling out to the boy, saying something similar to this in a child's voice. "Johnny, come play with me. I have plenty of cool rocks for you over here." The boy's father jumped up as he heard this faint whisper, and immediately screams for his son to come back. The voice then copies the father's voice, yelling with the exact same phrase, "Johnny, come back! Don't follow the voice!" At this point, everyone was freaking out, looking for the boy but staying relatively close together so no one would end up missing. They heard crying, but no one knew what to do because they knew the rule of never following it. But their child was now lost and had no other choice So the father of the boy runs inside and comes back out with a 12-gauge shotgun. So they follow the cries behind him as they edge closer to the woods, calling for the boy. As they got closer, they came upon a tree where it seems the crying is coming from. The father takes the lead and jumps to the other side of it to find his son huddled up, grabbing the tree for dear life. Johnny opened his trembling mouth, muttering, "Dad, there's something over there calling for me. I can still see it." The father swiftly turned his head to where his son was looking, but saw nothing out of place. "Here, son, let's take you back to the house. You'll be safe there," his father said as he handed the shotgun to his own father and picked up his son. "Dad, it's following us," Johnny said as he squeezed his father's arm tightly. "Don't look at it. Just tell me about your favorite food," the father replied in a worried but loving manner. "It looks like Mommy," Johnny stated quietly, and this sent shivers down his father's spine, and everyone heard what he was saying, but every time they looked back to see it, nothing was there. They all went inside after that, and haven't had a barbecue outside since. They were also the few ones to actually raise children here, due to how dangerous it is to have them wandering about. Their children, even though they were born out here in the country, have been stuck in their house for nearly their entire lives. It's sad, but I understand why they must take that precaution, because kids are so innocent and trusting. So when a voice that sounds like their mother's or a friend is calling for them, they will most likely listen to it and follow. Nearly the same thing happened with my sister, who has one child when she came to visit us. She didn't believe me at first when I told her about the voices and the crying that resonate in the woods. That also meant that she was letting her 7-year-old run around everywhere without watching him. She wasn't used to having to constantly keep an eye on him, and so he nearly ran off after the voice of another little boy who kept calling him to play with him. Her son came indoors and asked for permission, in his own words said, "Can I play with the boy that lives in the woods?" As soon as my sister heard this, her eyes grew wide as she realized what I was saying was right. She left that same night. I never invite my family to come to my house anymore, because when I do, that thing will mimic their voices afterward. It only can mimic the voices of people it has heard. So after my sister left my house, it kept beckoning me in her voice to come and help her find her way out of the woods. And like always, I ignore it. But this might backfire in the future if my sister ever did need my help, because I would instinctively ignore it. Now that is all I can write about it for now, but if anyone is able to exactly explain to me what this thing is, then I will gladly accept it. That's why I'm telling you as many traits of it as I can, but I must stop writing now, because the images of me dying are once again popping into my head. Last night I heard laughing coming from outside, and I'm not even damn joking. There was literally something chuckling like a crazed maniac on the other side of the wall. And I awoke with my blood pumping so hard that I felt like my veins were about to burst. I have never heard this before for the 2 years I have lived here, but I've been told the stories about it. Supposedly, when the thing begins laughing, which is extremely rare, and the last time it happened was when someone was taken from their house in the middle of the night. That person was a 70-year-old woman that had lived here all of her life. Her children had all moved away by then, and her spouse kicked the bucket 4 years prior. So she was all by herself, which is the same case I'm in right now. Also, guess what the police report said? It stated that she died of natural causes. There is nothing natural about being strung up in a damn freaking tree and gutted like a fish. That's how the people from town explained it to me, and they were very close to her, so when they heard about the cover-up, they went to complain about it. They were then told that if they really wanted to get the press involved, then they would have to lose all of their homes and land because the government would declare it unsafe land to live on. So they backed down. Anyway, when I checked my house this morning, I found the kitchen window wide open, and the lock to it was crushed to pieces. There was no way for me to keep it shut, so I had to resort to duct tape, which makes me look more like white trash than I already am. I looked at the back of my house, where I found the scratching previously, but nothing had changed since the day before, except for the pine needles being all stirred up. I decided to follow where it looked like something had dragged their legs through the needles, and it led to my window. I looked through it, and there was a small crack in the blinds which allowed a perfect view of my pillow, where I rest my head at night. My hands trembled when I realized someone was watching me as I slept, but I don't know if it was just some crazed lunatic, or if it was the thing from the woods. Some of you have commented that I should move away, and I was thinking that that was a drastic decision and not worth doing. But after last night, I feel like I have no other choice if I want to live. I ended up talking to my friend Manuel about everything, and he responded by saying, "You have to stop writing about that thing. It doesn't like to be explained to anyone or anything. That's why that old woman went missing a while back, because she kept telling her children about the strange occurrences of the voice after they had moved away. Then her children would tell people they knew, and so on and so forth." I replied saying, "But I think everyone should understand not to follow that voice or any others in the woods, because there has to be more than just this one out there." "That's exactly why it's trying to stop you from doing that. It doesn't want to be understood, because then it loses its power of luring people to it," Manuel said as he observed the damage to my house. "If I were you, I would delete those posts and stay off the internet for a week, and don't talk to anyone from out of town for a good while. Maybe that thing will forget what you've done. Just hope your post doesn't become too popular, because that would be a death sentence." Manuel finished talking as he took a Coke from my fridge. I agreed with what he said at the time, but I feel like I have an obligation to warn as many people as possible about whatever it is. Now I'm going to add that if I end up not posting anytime soon, then something happened to me, and who knows if I'll even make it through tonight. Please pray for me, no matter which God you believe in. I need all of the help I can get at this point. Before I end this post, however, I'm going to tell you the story I heard from Manuel about the search and rescue officer who made it out of the woods after losing one of his fellow officers. It was after that incident that they put up the signs and the fences trying to keep people out of the forest. I will tell you the story with the best of my remembrance of the events that took place. The scenario they were called out to the woods was that a young woman who was a sophomore in college was on a road trip to see her family after the school year ended and decided to stop and go hiking along the way. Her car was parked along the road and was there for 2 days until it was reported by someone in the town. The police came to check it out and found that she left her purse under the front seat, and it had her driver's license and school ID. They contacted her parents, who were worried sick because they had no idea where their daughter was. So the police called the search and rescue out on the scene, and they took off into the woods in the direction that the dogs caught her scent. They only sent 2 search and rescue officers to search for her, which is strange, as if the people who sent them already knew it was a lost cause and wanted to send people just to say that they tried their best. It was wrong, and they ended up sending 2 rookies out onto the scene, according to the officer who survived, because he'd said he'd only been on 2 other searches for missing people before this. So while they were having the dog follow her scent, they were able to see some of her footprints in the dirt. This brightened up their spirits because they knew they were headed in the right direction. However, as they continued on, they noticed that the footsteps began to become uneven and sink deeper into the ground as if she was running. They looked around to see if she was chased by a predator such as a bear, because they are common to this area, but there were no other tracks shown. The ground was also not disturbed other than her footprints. The rescue officers were wondering what had caused her to run so frantically, and that's when the dog yanked on the leash as it barked at a nearby tree. They thought they must be close due to the dog's reaction, but they called out, and no one replied back except for a faint whimper. The whimpering slowly turned to blood-curdling screaming, and the officers looked ahead and saw the woman on her hands and knees crying on the ground. The officer's partner ran forward to help her while he stayed back and held onto the dog that was still barking furiously at her. "What's wrong, boy? You found her," the one officer said to the dog, as the dog's ears dropped down, and the dog out of nowhere yanks on the leash, which is loosely held by the rescue officer, allowing him to escape. The dog ran to where they came from in a dead-out sprint. The officer called out for him to come back and blew the dog whistle, but he never did. He soon gave up on trying to call him back as he heard laughing, and he turned his head. He noticed that the girl was now holding his colleague by the neck. He didn't know how to react and yelled, "Put him down! We're here to help you!" The laughing only grew worse as he watched his colleague's face turn purple, before she looked at him with a big grin on her face. The officer just ran, leaving his partner behind while screaming on his radio that he needed backup, but no one ever responded. Behind him, he could hear the crunching and popping of breaking bones. He was able to escape and got back to his search and rescue work truck. He drove like a madman out of there, and no one believed his story. He lost his job because he had abandoned his partner, and his partner's body was never found. He told Manuel the story, and Manuel told me. He told the people in this town because they were the only ones who took his story seriously, while the others would mock him and call him a coward. That description of it, and the other story I told you earlier about the 5-year-old boy who said he saw his mom looking back at him from the woods, proves to me that this thing can do more than just mimic people's voices and cries. It can also shapeshift, which makes me believe it's either a skinwalker or something that's never been heard of before. All I know is that it's getting into my head and ravaging my thoughts like a crazed animal consuming a carcass. Again, pray for me. I'm going to stay tonight at Manuel's house because I don't feel safe at my own home. If I ride again, then it means I made it through the night, but if I don't, then consider this my last testament. Till we hopefully meet again, always remember to stay safe out there, and listen to my advice. If you hear someone crying in the forest off of the main trail, if you have a death wish, go and try to find them. I dare you.